Morning, everyone. It is a beautiful sunny morning here in Noblesville, Indiana. I hope wherever you are at, it is a wonderfully sunny summer day here. I'm Mayor Chris Jensen, mayor of my hometown of Noblesville, Indiana. I'm here with my good friend, the owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling here in Noblesville, Kristen Boyce. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jensen. I am thrilled to be here today to talk all things stress related.
I love it. This is another edition of Mental Health Monday. Couldn't come at a better time. And I owe you a huge thank you, Kristen. You stepped in for me in May when the calendar got a little crazy and hosted Mental Health Monday on your own, which you do your own podcast anyway. So you are so well versed at this. But I just appreciate your assistance. I know we had our team from Noble Act on there with you too, who are an absolute blessing to this community. So thank you for doing that.
It was wonderful. I so enjoyed our conversation and the work they're doing in the community and thought it was such an important topic. So if you missed it, go back and rewatch it because they shared so much wisdom and resources that are available right here.
Well, and I'm glad that really the community was able to kind of get a front row seat kind of to how we are approaching public safety in Noblesville. I said, it's different than when you and I were growing up around here. We are now dealing with a whole different deck of cards, if you will, at times. Or quite frankly, it probably is the same deck of cards. We're just viewing it very differently because of the work that you've done around kind of talking about mental health and proactive paramedicine. So that Noble Act team is really the future of public safety in our community, really helping folks process their emotions, not only in the community, but also our officers. So Maisha and Ben and their team are great additions to our Noblesville community. But today we're going to talk a little bit about summertime stress. And before we came on, Kristen and I were discussing what it's like to have kids at home in summer. Kristen, your kids are at a little bit different phase of life, probably still sleeping maybe now. I'm just teasing, but you get the teenage life. It's different. I have little kids at home, and so that makes summertime different. So we're going to discuss strategies around how to maneuver that, how to manage that, how to make summertime more fun for you and your family, and kind of approaching different strategies around that on Mental Health Monday. So before we get started, though, we're going to do some square breathing, which is one of my favorite things to do, and I do all the time. So I'll let Kristen walk us through that exercise.
So the first thing when we talk about stress is your body responds to stress. They're external environmental factors, and your body picks up on stress. And so, one of the techniques I teach every single person that comes into my office or a speaking engagement is deep breathing. And because the first thing we know about stress is it lives, breathes, and absorbs into your body. And then you get sick. You start feeling energy decrease. You start feeling more agitated, and we do the breathing to help us regulate our nervous systems. And the other component of this is feeling your feet first. I keep saying that. And there was a podcast and the gal said, feel your feet first. I'm like, yes, this is what we teach to stay grounded and centered, because a regulated nervous system is the most powerful nervous system in a space or in a room. So just think about a regulated nervous system is contagious. And so that's why we want to work on the body first, and the breath and feeling your feet on the floor help us regulate and come back out of fight or flight into the present moment. So having said that, let's put our feet on the floor, feeling your feet first on the ground, kind of grounding in to the floor. You might be, and if you're driving, obviously we're going to just take this as a deep breath exercise. You can still feel yourself in a chair wherever you are if you're sitting down. And then we're going to inhale through our nose, exhale slowly out our mouths. The reason why we're doing this is that we're coming from what we call the sympathetic nervous system, kind of that fight or flight, to the parasympathetic nervous system, the calmer state in the body. So that's why we're doing an inhale through our nose and we're holding, and then we're exhaling slowly out of our mouths. I was working with a client the other day, and I said, we got to take a deeper inhale, and then holding that breath and trying to get a benefit of the full belly breath is super important to coming back out of that sympathetic to the parasympathetic. So let's do it together. Big, deep inhale through your nose. We're going to hold. And now we're going to let go out of our mouths. Yes, and feel free to stretch. Give yourself any kind of stretching or releasing that you might need. Let's do one more. Feeling your feet first on the floor. Big, deep inhale through your nose. Hold and slow exhale out your mouth. I don't know about you, but I can feel that just that release on that exhale. And my body and my shoulders just kind of letting go of all that tension and tightness in the body.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually laying in bed last night. My 9-year-old Vivian could not fall asleep. She kept crying for no reason. Of course, she said no reason, and so we were laying there, and she has horse camp today that she's going to, and she's been to horse camp many times, but not this summer. And she's moving up to a new age group today. So I think we were able to peel back those layers a little bit. She woke up this morning. She's a little shaky. Wasn't sure why she was shaking. So as a parent, it was interesting to kind of watch her play through that because I knew exactly what it was. I'm excited to pick her up here at 1:30 to see how it went. But it was exactly living in her body. She could not get herself to go to sleep. She woke up early this morning. She was shaky. And that was exactly what you just said, that anxiety, stress lives in the body. So we were working through it last night at the Jensen house when we were talking about deep breathing.
Good for you for noticing. That's the beauty of doing this work as a parent. You can notice, oh, you're afraid you're not going to have any friends. You're afraid of the transition. That is the external thoughts and factors that then get housed in the body. And you'll see with kids, they'll get shaky. They'll have a headache. They'll be worried. They're like, I just can't sleep. Their mind races just like adults. So beautiful job just seeing what was going on in her nervous system.
Yes. Well, I just made smoked salmon on the Blackstone too, so they were trying to blame it on maybe dad's cooking. I was like, no. My salmon was great. It was anxiety. So I was working through that. But all right, let's get talking about summertime stress, because parents, again, I was laughing, say people are like, oh, are you excited for summertime? Like I certainly am, but anyone who's too excited for summertime doesn't probably have small kids at home. So it is a very difficult time for a lot of people, juggling a lot of different things going on. Before we start too, if you have any questions in the chat or comments, feel free to type those in as we go. We're happy to kind of answer them on the fly, or we can get some information for you later. So please use that chat feature if you can, and let us know you're listening, or say hi, whatever you want to do. Feel free to use that. So, but let's transition. It is summertime across the country. There's a lot of moving parts. People are still working. Baseball is still in full swing. Sports, camps. Camps are from 10 to 1. Well, that doesn't work well for a working parent. How do you manage that? You might have a babysitter at your house all day. You're staying up later. You have to work. All the things that I just literally threw up everything I'm thinking. So that's just me being real. So let's talk a little bit about how we manage that, what that might look like for you, and how do we manage it?
Yes. And I think the first thing that you said is real. We have to be real with what we're feeling. We have to be authentic. We have to be connected to our own bodies and our own thoughts. And so a lot of times we think stress can be all bad. And I want to say there can be positive stress. So I want to distinguish the two. So for example, let's say you're interviewing for a new job, or your child's going out for something and they make it, or you get the job. You're excited, but yet you have a stress, okay, which is an external factor of the transition. So we're kind of distinguishing between how do you regulate your nervous system when you have overwhelm, whether it's a job change, financial situation, maybe a divorce, maybe a relationship challenge, having the kids home all day, maybe they're dysregulated and they're, wanting your attention, and you're trying to do multiple things at once and take care of the house. You've got a lot going on, and there can be other cultural variables as well, things going on in the world. And we want to acknowledge what you're feeling, first of all. It's that whole idea of putting your oxygen mask on first. Mm-hmm. Before you can help other people. So even with kids, let's say they're wanting something, you're trying to drive them here and there, you've got work, you've got all these things, you've got household chores, you've got a lot going on. The main thing I want to tell you is come back into your body. That is hard to do when we have all of these external factors. And it may sound like, really, Kristen, this is what you're giving advice about. it's one of the hardest things to do because we didn't see perhaps a breathing parent, a regulated parent. We saw a stressed parent. We saw a parent doing everything, and wasn't able to kind of take a moment, take a breath, center, and calm. And here's the thing, everybody's got stress. It's a matter of how do you respond to it. This is the key. How do you respond to the external factors? And if we're not responding well, we're reactive and we haven't slept, we're maybe drinking our feelings, we're maybe, drinking too much caffeine, we aren't taking care, we're not putting the oxygen mask on first, it's going to be real hard to caretake other people. It's going to be really hard to stay regulated. And I think that's the first thing we've got to kind of acknowledge.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually call a little bit of an audible in this conversation, Kristen Boyce, because there are some folks chiming in on chat, Courtney and Jim Culp. I know them well, and they're actually talking about something going on right now in Noblesville that I think we can actually address here on the show. So you may know, and Kristen, you and I have chatted about this, that there are a lot of changes in our community. There's a lot of construction going on in the summertime in Indiana, and one of the issues that they are pointing out is we're actually working within a neighborhood right now to remove some street trees that are actually causing some sidewalk damage within our community. And it's been a big topic, and it's been a very emotional topic. It's been one that I've worked hard to address the last several months. A lot of community members have had strong feelings about. And so I thought maybe we could touch on that right now. I don't want to ignore what's being said in the chat right now. So I'm gonna lean into that. So can we talk a little bit about change maybe in our community? Maybe there's change outside our front door, and maybe there are changes to our communities and what it may look like. Can we talk a little bit about some tips to process that? Courtney mentioned that she's feeling dysregulated, so maybe we could talk a little bit about how we would address that in our community in a productive way.
Yeah, first of all, I want to acknowledge that if you have feelings about losing, I think it's trees. I don't have my glasses on. Losing trees, that makes sense. Nobody wants to lose nature. Nobody wants to lose trees in their neighborhood. That they look beautiful. They're, vibrant, and they mean something. They look good, but they also have meaning and memories attached to it. So I want to say there's a lot of grief and fear of like, oh my gosh, this is going to change how things look. This is going to change how perhaps, things look when you drive into the neighborhood. There's lots of fear around change. And I think acknowledging the feelings attached to that makes sense. It makes sense that they have feelings about it. It makes sense that they don't want to lose those.
Yeah.
And so when we can acknowledge like the facts of that, makes total sense. You would prefer to keep the trees because they look nice and they've been there, and right. So I think the first thing is acknowledgement of emotions and how things feel, look, and the attachment to it. And we don't want to lose that. We always hate to lose anything nature related, in my opinion. I think that's really hard. So acknowledging the emotions, acknowledging people's wants and how that's their home. So we have to acknowledge that safety gets connected to homes and neighborhoods, and that's lives in the nervous system. So I do want to acknowledge that when there's a change in a home or an environment around your home or your neighborhood, it can really cause dysregulation because that's your safe place. So that's the first thing I would say. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. And this is something, the trees are very topical right now because that's going on. But we've seen that in any community. I think about, growing up in Noblesville. What did Noblesville look like as a kid? I've lived here my whole life as well. And I've seen what once were fields maybe that I grew up in are now turning into neighborhoods. And so I think it's really difficult to process that. We've seen, especially the last couple of years, as we've seen a lot of growth in Noblesville, things have changed, and we work to try to appropriately address that and do that in a civil way, do that in a way that allows both sides to be heard. But we have to your point, acknowledge that this is a tough conversation around change. And I think from my seat in particular, I don't want to speak for anyone in the administration, but okay. All right. So I think it's important to acknowledge that this is very difficult, but we're trying to act like grownups. We're trying to handle it appropriately. We're trying to make sure, I always make sure that I try to, when I'm addressing a tough situation, do so in a respectful, kind way, knowing that I have maybe my kids watching me and are watching how I'm acting. I think that's really important too. But you're right, acknowledging change is very difficult.
Yeah.
So one thing I would love to talk a little bit about, like if people are dysregulated right now, if you're feeling that in the moment, whether it be you're in a neighborhood where there's something changing, or if you're in traffic in downtown, that's certainly something we've seen a lot of lately too. Maybe some tips in that moment to kind of work through that change.
So we have the brain, okay, and everybody's going to get triggered by stuff. I mean, they get triggered with traffic. Lots of triggers. Okay, that's just part of how life works. We're going to have triggers. A trigger's for me to own. So I have to look at how my brain and my body work. So this is the brain. This is Dr. Dan Siegel's work, which I love his work. So one of the books I recommend for parents is Parenting from the Inside Out, which is really how we manage our own triggers. And so when we have a trigger, what happens is we can flip our lids. Okay. Now, if I flip my lid, I have now taken what's called the prefrontal cortex, my rational side of the brain, my centered and calm side of the brain offline. And so then it's going to be harder this just happened last night in our house. We had a trigger. And my husband was like, he was worked up. And I said, okay, you're not going to be able to be heard if you're coming at someone intensely, like you're really coming at someone. Maybe you're attacking them, and he wasn't attacking anyone, but he was dysregulated a little bit. And I said, you're going to be able to feel be heard better the more centered you are. So if you flip, I've taken the prefrontal cortex, the calming side of the brain offline. I'm in fight or flight at this point. And I may be coming with fight. I may be wanting to flee. And so what we work on through the breathing that we did at the beginning, feeling our feet on the floor, is we want to come back into a regulated body. I can still feel my feelings. I can still feel sad. I can still feel angry. I can still feel upset. And I can be regulated at the same time because I'm in my body, I'm breathing. I'm not coming to you in a fight response or a dysregulated response. This is one of the most important things I teach parents, I teach kids, is how do we communicate in a regulated way? And it doesn't mean that this situation will change. So I may say, I don't like the XYZ. And the situation still may be that situation will, like the traffic. I don't like the traffic, but there's nothing I can do about it. I have maybe we've said how we feel, we've communicated, but there's just things that have to happen in order to ultimately make traffic flow at the end of the day better. It's just short-term pain for long-term, whatever it is, traffic flow.
Sure.
I have to stay in my body, stay regulated so I don't flip into that fight flight. So then I can feel my body's not taking the onus of whatever's happening, because at the end of the day, you will end up paying a price. So how do you respond to the stress? Again, am I flipping my lid, or am I coming back to calm and staying regulated? And I might not be able to communicate for a while. I might have to take a pause on communicating until I'm regulated, until I'm in a calmer state. And I always tell people, like, give yourself 24 hours before you respond to anything. Write it out, get it out, but don't send it because it may not be received. Send it when you're in a more regulated state and you can release the outcome. This is the other part of stress. We are attached to outcomes, and this is what's hard. I want something to go a certain way that makes me feel better. I feel calmer. And sometimes we don't have control over that. So most of the time, control is kind of an illusion. I can voice my opinion, I can share my feelings, but it doesn't mean it might not change the outcome. It's more for me to stay regulated and not take on or internalize that stress. It's for me to learn how to release the outcome. And this is really hard to do. I'm going to be doing it my whole life. I'm not saying, oh, just release the outcome and then it's all better. It's a process for me to unattach to outcomes. I want a guarantee. I want what I want. I want what, this is hard. And this is one of the things that we're releasing in life is I can say how I feel, I can communicate, but it doesn't mean I have control of the outcome.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that. And again, I'm going to move on because I do want to talk a little bit about summertime stress, but I'm not going to be one that shies away from acknowledging the topic of today and what Courtney and others have commented there. I certainly respect and to your point that this is a very difficult conversation, and I appreciate the tips that you've offered as we continue to work through this challenging time. Let's talk a little bit about summertime and kids with parents. I just think that's such a topical thing right now in June. Camps are going on, kids' schedules. You may be working from home. You may be trying to work from home. You may be having a sitter there. So let's talk a little bit how we process that, not just as parents, but kids, and making sure our kids have an enjoyable summer, but also making sure that we're having an enjoyable summer.
First of all, let's just acknowledge again, I love acknowledgement that there will be probably more stress if you're both parents are working or you're working and kids are home and you're driving them here and there and everywhere. Here's the first thing I want to say is you're not alone. So having a support system, if you can, that is really helpful. So having people you can talk to, having maybe other people to help, or maybe you have to hire childcare, et cetera. There's still coordination involved in that, and there still can be stress involved in that. And we want to notice your body's response to it. Are you feeling tense? Is your breath changing? Are you feeling tighter in your face, in your jaw, in your mouth, your tongue? I mean, how much of that stress are you carrying internally? And then sometimes this is really helpful that I don't think we tell ourselves enough is, how am I talking to myself? Am I like, I'm going to be late. Oh my gosh, the kids aren't going to stop, wanting things from me. It's our self-talk is super important as well. Once we regulate the nervous system and regulate your body, I kind of talk to myself. If you come, this. If I come to my house, I'm going, it's okay. Take a deep breath. And I might even put my hand right here to remind myself to breathe, to calm myself down, to watch how I'm handling myself, talk myself through something. So if I'm in traffic, I might say, there's nothing I can do about it. I am just going to have to take my deep breaths. I'm going to text the person I'm going to be late, perhaps, and I'm going to say, there's nothing I can do about it. So I have to calm myself down. I'm talking myself through it as if you have this person, a coach next to you going, it's okay. We're going to get through this. Talking yourself through something is a skill that I want to also teach my kids. So if they're stressed, they're afraid of, they're not going to make a friend, or they're going to have a change, go to a new camp, and they're not going to know anyone. I say, talk yourself through it. So you're going to say, it's okay. I know you're scared, and it's going to be all right. You're going to be okay. Like, talking yourself through that is a skill that we didn't learn. And so self-compassion and really kind of being your own internalized parent is something I tell parents to work on. And even talking to themselves out loud can be helpful, as long as they're not going, oh my gosh, and they're screaming at their kids. I mean, that's not going to be helpful. But if I'm talking myself through something, that's helpful. Like the other day I said, okay, we're going to be a few minutes late, and it's okay. Mm-hmm. Like, saying that out loud can help my kid calm their nervous system down. But if I'm panicked and being like, we're going to be late, which I've done, is not helpful, because now they're panicked. So it's really mindful of your thoughts connected to your nervous system.
I think that's exactly right. And one thing that I've learned so much from you over the last couple of years is that you are a reflection of your household, right? And if you are acting a certain way, your kids will follow that. Last night my oldest, I was taking him to what I thought was a basketball game at PAC, which is the Pacers Athletic Center. And we got there and he asked what court we were on. I said, well, it's a yellow court. He goes, Dad, we don't have yellow courts here. I was like, oh, that's good, because it's at the Best Choice Fieldhouse in Fishers. And so we got there, and he was great. He said, Dad, it's okay. I was like, I'm sorry. I owned my mistake. That was Dad not checking the calendar ahead of time, which happens to everybody. And he gave me some grace. And we just calmly made our way over to PAC, or to the Best Choice, and played fine. So, but again, giving yourself a little grace. You tried to use the phrase the last couple months, especially in Noblesville, around like, we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can. I think parents can relate to that.
Yeah. And I think it's hard to kind of give ourselves that, especially if we've messed up. Let's say we have gotten really dysregulated and we've lost our cool. It's hard sometimes to forgive ourselves. And when we can say and own it, when we can take full radical responsibility, and this is key in life, I tell you, the healing comes. That is one of the greatest gifts we give to ourselves and then generations to come. Because what did we want from other people? We wanted people to take responsibility for how they talk to us, how they speak to us, their dysregulation, maybe what they did to us. We want full responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, behavior, and actions. And when we can do that, that is the freedom that we can get on the other side to our healing. It truly is. And it's hard when we feel, especially if we feel like there's nothing for us to own. We're like, well, we didn't do anything wrong. I'm like, how about your reaction to whatever happened? And that doesn't mean we own what the other person did whatsoever. It's how do I take ownership for my own healing? Do I stay stuck in it? Or do I say, you know what, that wasn't okay. And I'm going to take responsibility for tending to that pain I have, that hurt I have, that anger maybe. And so that it doesn't eat me up.
Well, that's a great way of putting it. I think, as we kind of wrap up today's show a little bit, I know we've been a little bit all over the place, which I just genuinely appreciate your flexibility on this, Kristen, too. But, if I'm a parent or even if I'm a kid this summer, trying to manage everything, what are maybe some 3 or 4 tips that you can give everybody over the next several months to kind of manage through maybe just a different season in life?
Prioritize your sleep. I can't say that enough. We know sleep affects the brain and the body. The second thing is you've got to get into some rhythm of self-care. What do I mean by that? I don't mean going to the spa. I mean, how are you regulating your nervous system? Is it through a walk? Is it through playing with your pet? Is it through music? Maybe you need to laugh more. Like I saw David Spades come into the Clues and I'm like, click, 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 sign me up. I need to laugh. I feel like if we are regulated and I'm stuck in maybe a triggered response, I'm not accessing any joy in my life. That's hard to access joy. So maybe you need to have more laughter. Maybe there's you need to prioritize some time with some friends or a support group. That can be extremely helpful. We love journaling. We love processing what you're feeling. So if we're processing what's going on in the inside, we're going to be more regulated. We're going to be able to respond rather than react to the external circumstances in life.
That's great. That's great advice. And I think, again, trying to just making sure that we have a plan for ourselves and we're able to control our actions going forward. So, Kristen Boyce, again, I thank you so much for the constant giving of your time to help us manage through all sorts of seasons of life. And I'm looking forward to being back here next month with you on another edition of Mental Health Monday in July as we tackle some new topics and even some new special guests joining us this summertime too. But if someone is in crisis right now, if they are really having a mental health crisis, where do they turn for help?
988. You can call or text 20 hours, 7 days a week. There's trained clinicians on the other end. So if someone is suicidal or having suicidal thoughts, or they're like, I don't want to be here, I'm a burden, please reach out to 988. It's the number one resource. We have 911. Now we have 988 for anything mental health related. So if you're really struggling, please know you don't have to do this alone. You matter, you're important, you're enough, and you're loved, because we don't get told that enough. And so 988 is the number one resource that I recommend right now. Obviously, there's therapy. And if you need 911, that's also a resource.
It's awesome. Well, thank you, Kristen Boyce, for your time today. We appreciate it. Parents, kids, stick together this summer. Give some grace along the way and know that you're doing your best. We really appreciate you. And we'll see you back here next month. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.